2023 meeting to order. Do I have a motion on the Clerk General?
So moved. Yes.
And yes. And the requisitions?
So moved. And yes.
Yes. And it is now 9 o'clock, so we can continue with our administrative hearing of the Green Meadows PUD Stage 2 in Franklin Township. Welcome back. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Ryan Cook. I'm with the Warren County Regional Planning Commission. And I just wanted to give a quick recap of, this is just a continuation of the Green Meadows PUD Stage 2. And then we just wanted to turn it over to the engineers since I know we wanted more information from them. So I'll then call them up for them to speak.
So before you begin, I need to swear you in.
I know how this works.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Kurt Weber, Chief Deputy Engineer, Warren County Engineers Office. We were not at the first, or when the hearing started 2 weeks ago, so appreciate the invitation to come down. And it's our understanding, correct us if we're wrong, but I think there was some concern about speeding with traffic in Wilson Farms, and also the wider thoroughfare plan streets, the collectors. So since your first, you opened the hearing 2 weeks ago, we met virtually with Planning Commission staff and Michelle Tigmeyer, and looked at some, and Neil and Dave Mick from our office, and looked at some possibilities. And we also, in that meeting, I should mention too, was the developer and John Delverne from Bayer Becker and V.R. Horton. So thought it was a good meeting, very productive, and we talked about narrowing the street pavement. We would be fine with that if the commissioners are so inclined to narrow it to 24 feet for the north-south street, as long as there's no parking permitted on that street. And then on the east-west street, narrow that from, I should say that it was originally planned at 36 feet width, and it was to narrow it to 24 feet north-south with no parking. And then on the east-west street, originally 36 feet, to narrow that to 30 feet with parking on one side of the street, the non-hydrant side. And that was something that we brainstormed probably for 45 minutes to an hour, and that's what we came up with. And I don't want to speak for the applicant, the developer, but I believe they were on board with that. And so that's what we are proposing. And I guess it would be a deviation from the thoroughfare plan, Bruce, I believe, correct? Just
The Board of County Commissioners would have to unanimously approve a deviation from the thoroughfare plan in order to do what you're proposing.
correct. And so the deviation would be just to narrow the width of pavement, if you will, from that 36 feet to 30 feet, with parking on one side of the street for east-west, and then 36 feet to 24 feet on the north-south street with no parking. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, I think you drafted language? Okay.
Yeah, Kurt, so explain to me the rationale, because I think it's reasonable on the east-west collector road to do that. But in reality, when you have that many homes lined up now and you're going to say no on-street parking at all?
Not on the east-west. The east-west would have parking on one side of the street.
Yeah, the north-south is going to have none.
That's what we were proposing, just because we were going from 36 feet to 24 feet. And the reason we proposed that, great question, because we went back and forth on this a little bit. If you look at that layout, that north-south street is in effect only loaded on one side of the street, on the east side. Because all the houses to the west
No parking.
would be, would have driveway access off the east-west, sorry, yeah, neighborhood, yeah.
So can you put up the, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so the street that's at the top, the very top,
Yes, sir.
going across, no parking on that street?
That'll have,
Yeah, that would have parking on.
That would have
both
parking,
sides.
and so it's just the east-west, is the east-west the one on the far right?
that's north-south.
Okay, well, that's what I thought. So the east-west one is the top one, the blue one at the top.
On one side.
One side.
Yeah, so this would be one side.
Well, which one has no parking?
The one that has no parking proposed would be this one.
That's, okay,
Just
that-
because all these lots that are on the west side of this street, they all have driveway access on the east-west. Oh, thank you, Candace. So basically, sorry about that, here's the microphone. So these folks here to the west of the north-south street all have, driveway access off the east-west street, whereas these folks, so in effect, this street is one side loaded. If you wanted to put parking permitted on that side, we could do the same thing like we did on the east-west street and just go with 30-foot pavement. That's fine. I mean, that's a possibility.
I'm just thinking in reality, that entire north-south street, on occasion, everyone's going to have people over.
A birthday party.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I've got
Right,
my
understand.
driveway can accommodate 3 people, now you've got to park on a separate street? On
Yeah,
what-
that's fine. It's up to you guys.
well, I mean, what do you recommend?
We already gave our recommendation, but yeah, if you guys, I think the developer was okay with that parking, but there again, it could be a problem. That's true.
But is there a
so-
reason why you had different specifications for those two roads? That's what I'm
We
asking.
were just trying to make sure, in the spirit of the fact that these were collector streets, trying to still see that they functioned as a collector, but with a narrower pavement. And so with this, that's why we went to the 24 feet with no parking, but we could easily say 30 feet with parking on one side of the street on this one too.
Because the parking itself also has the effect of slowing down traffic.
Yes, understand. Yeah, that's true. That's the reason, I guess,
Do we have an expanded map that shows the subdivisions or the development to the south?
yeah, down this way, so
That was platted out. There was one where you saw both plats.
Right.
yeah, so yeah, so what happens is, if you can see this street here, this is Wilson Farms Boulevard. In Wilson Farms, it's north-south, and then it goes to the east, and then it would continue into the Madison Grace Way, I believe it is, which is that easternmost north-south street. And then it ends up there, so.
All right, so this was all prompted by an individual, and I don't know if he's here today, who came in from the subdivision to the south, who had an issue or concern about the speed of traffic going through their neighborhood. How would making this change have any impact upon that areas and the speed of traffic to the south?
Yeah, I think just making narrower pavement, the
No,
pavement.
how would it affect the people to the south doing this change?
Yeah, I don't know that it would,
And that-
Yeah.
When I look at it, I don't think it would either. So,
unless they drive that way, it's probably not gonna impact them,
well,
that's correct.
yeah, but the street that they would drive on would be one that is not being modified at all.
I think it's twofold. I think his concerns were the speed, number one, that's what he was seeing presently in this very wide, almost look like.
Yeah, it's 36 feet wide.
Yeah, so no cars on it, people are just flying up and down it naturally, it feels safe, that's what naturally drivers do. But the other concern was with the traffic backup at the intersection, down there at 122 and Robinson Vale, that apparently that backs up a fair amount that if you have these super wide, nice collector streets coming in from the east-west connector, that's going to be a natural workaround, that now just local traffic that doesn't even live in there is just gonna cut through these really nice, wide, looks like thoroughfares to cut off and get around and avoid that intersection was one of his other problems. So I think it was twofold, trying to keep the speed down in those areas, and then also not give this appearance of, oh, this is just a natural flow of traffic through this subdivision. I don't even live here. I'm just trying to get, east on 122.
No, I understand. That's a good point. I think they did mention that. Yeah, so what you're saying, Commissioner Young, is that the traffic on 122 heading towards Robinsonville, that could potentially back up, so that might create a cut through.
It's more Robinsonville backs up. So as people are heading south
Yeah.
from
Oh,
Robinsonville,
they would go south or north to south. Okay.
yeah, they're going south, and it's apparently backed up a lot. And so then instead of waiting at that stop sign, they're just gonna cut through.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that's always possible. You know, I don't know, Ryan, if we can get the subdivision map back on there, maybe just, because there's two north-south streets here. So this street here, if they were to cut through, which,
Well,
I don't know that they would be, to be honest with you, I don't know that they'd be any time ahead to cut through, because these are 25-mile-an-hour streets, come in, come down, and then go out, and then they'll have a difficult time getting out onto 122, to be honest with you,
Well,
during the morning rush hour. But if they did, this street, you know, it's the 24 feet wide, with parking on one side of the street. I don't know that they would come over here, but maybe they would.
Well, that's with a Williams, what is it called?
Wilson Farms.
Wilson Farms Boulevard was the street that I
Yeah,
think the person was talking about.
which goes from here, and then Tama goes up.
Yeah, but it
that.
was going through their neighborhood to the south of that. And if people are gonna go, when this thing gets developed, the only impact that I can see is that they're gonna take a left on that first street you see that you're
Yeah, right
you're
here.
not modifying at all. Well, but they're gonna go up to that street through the curved street there. You see that?
This one here.
Yeah. Well, that's not being changed. Anything we do with this area is not gonna have any impact upon the people to the south. That's my conclusion of what you're showing us.
I think you're probably right. I mean, that's.
Okay, so
that's-
this is irrelevant to that. So then the only real question that I have, is this the proper way to, with this, thinking about this neighborhood, since nothing we're gonna do here is gonna have any impact upon the complaint or the concern that was addressed to us last week that prompted this delay, is this the proper way for this particular neighborhood that's now under consideration for development, should we be changing the thoroughfare plan for this neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I guess two thoughts. One, if this street's more narrow and this street's more narrow, it could reduce speeds. I mean, it could be, to your point, I don't disagree with what you said, Commissioner Grossman, but I mean, making this more narrow, it could maybe be a slight deterrent, but we all know if traffic's backed up and, on the north-south Robinsonville and somebody decides to cut through, it probably doesn't matter if it's 30 feet wide or 24 feet wide.
Well, why
or
is it that
36
we
feet wide.
have the original thoroughfare plan the way it is? I thought that was related in part to emergency vehicles and getting them in and out. How will this affect, is that a concern?
Emergency vehicles?
Yeah.
No, I mean, the thoroughfare plan is something that we've looked at, some cases, 25, 30 years ago, and some cases more recent. And what we generally try to do is look at spacing of streets, and if there's a great spacing, between east-west connections, then we look at, oh, hey, this would be a good place for an east-west connection. So that's kind of how that's come about. But as far as the emergency vehicles, they'll be able to certainly, I mean, a good grid of, streets certainly helps that. But as far as widths, no matter whether this is, 24 feet wide or 36 feet wide or 30 feet wide, that emergency vehicles will still have good access to get in and out of there.
All right, so if we do parking on one side of the street with both of those streets, how wide do they have to be?
Yeah, I mean, what we were proposing for this one would be 30 feet wide with parking on one side of the street. So that's what we would propose on this one as well.
30 feet wide
If you
with
want
parking on one
that
side?
street, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. How about the developer? Now, the developer, would you like to come forward? Now, Bruce, the developer was sworn in. Do I need to re-swear them in since we're
No,
on a new day?
just have him affirm
Okay.
that he was sworn in.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Rob Smith with D.R. Horton. Thank you for having
And
me
can you
back.
confirm that you were sworn in at the last hearing?
I was.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yes, thank you to Kurt. Appreciate the opportunity to work with your team. I think we had a good discussion, which came to hopefully a good resolution. Commissioner, just to answer your question, we did go back and forth, as Kurt said, about what to do with the far east north-south street, which is Madison Grace. We felt that because it is only one-sided, it's really only one-sided with houses, because every other house on that street really will front onto one of those east-west connector streets in there. So there would not be as much of a need for on-street parking, because anybody that had a guest could easily park in one of those other side streets. So to your point, Commissioner, cars on the street do slow things down, but the level of cars on the street parked come and go. What never would change is the width of the street. So that is the major factor which will calm traffic. Cars parked on the street will add to that, but that can come and go. What can never change is the width of the street, of course. So that's why we erred on the side of going on with that narrower street. We didn't think that it would be a deterrent to any potential home buyer who wanted to live on that street if we told them that no parking would be allowed, because they could see easier, as nobody's going to have to walk very far if you could park on one of the other streets. But there's just, with it being double loaded, that main entrance street, the one that runs east-west at the top, we thought that was just too impractical to not have any on-street parking. So that was the genesis of that conversation.
Well, why wouldn't you want to have on-street parking on one side of the street with the other road that you're suggesting? Oh, because they got some side roads. It's awfully going to be, people are going to be illegally parking all the time because they just assume there's got to be a place to park on that street. And so we're going to have this situation where you're going to have on-street parking anyway. And as a developer, I don't understand why you wouldn't want that.
Well, we would be sure to put up signs that say no parking, just like on the other street, we would have signs on the one side that say no parking. So that's something that will have to be enforced like anything else. But we will have enough signs that if people are going to be illegally parked, it will have been obvious to them.
What is your interest in not having parking on that street?
We just want the narrower road.
And that's
I
because
do.
of a cost standpoint?
No, I mean, I guess that helps, yes, but no, we see what happens in some of existing neighborhoods when people drive too fast. It is harder to advertise and sell your lots and get people to want to live on a street that is wider where people drive faster. So we think that those lots will not be as desirable, and it will just not make for as nice of a neighborhood because people will be speeding.
Well, I generally will do whatever the property owner wants to do. So I guess I'm not gonna object to that. I don't think this is a good idea to not have parking on that street, but, okay.
To what? I'm sorry.
I'll vote to take the parking away from that street if that's what the developer wants, but I don't think that's a
No,
good
I think,
idea.
I think the idea is to put the parking on the street,
No, he wants it
To
off
narrow-
that street entirely.
to narrow the road and put parking on one side.
No, that's only the one that's, this one.
okay with no parking.
He wants no parking on this entire street.
Yeah, only on the one on the right side of that screen. The
and
one on
all
the
I-
top, we definitely believe there needs to be one-sided parking, yes.
Right, so in other words, that entire street that's running, I guess, north-south, that's blue, they don't want parking on that street. And I think that's impractical, but if that's what they want, I mean, you know.
And I understand your point. If there weren't the, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roads running off to the west there, where there would be enough parking, nobody's gonna have to walk more than a half a block to their home. If you're visiting someone who lives on one of those homes in the far east, you park on the side street.
How large are these lot sizes? What are these lot sizes?
I'm sorry, say again?
How large are the lot sizes again? What's the frontage?
The frontage is 61 feet, I believe.
Okay, so these are pretty, you know, this is a relatively small lot. You're gonna, you're gonna have families that have, for example, on a street, in a neighborhood like this, you may have families that park on the street, and they're not gonna be able to park in front of their house. So,
Which means they won't sell,
yeah,
which I'm okay with.
I don't know, I would be perturbed about this, but it's your development, so I don't know, I mean,
Well, I mean, as I understood it from the last hearing, the developer was not asking for a deviation. The gentleman who was here was suggesting to us that a narrower street would calm traffic. And then the developer or his agent said, yeah, we agree with that, and we'd be open to that, and so we're allowing them to have some time to have a conversation about it. So I don't know that the developer is necessarily asking, though admitting that it was a good opportunity for you to get what you really wanted, which was narrower streets, because you think in the marketplace that's more desirable. The question, I mean, I don't necessarily want to wade into the parking question per se, because I guess that's up to the developer to determine that, but it seems to me that those would be, a lot of these families have 3 and 4 vehicles.
Well, yeah, the reason I brought it up was clearly because, yeah, there's a safety issue with people, and there's an enforcement issue. Sheriff's Department now has to go and write a bunch of tickets, blah, blah, blah. But it sounds like from the developer standpoint, his engineer standpoint, our county engineer standpoint, that the narrower street trumps everything else, with the caveat of, okay, you're walking 200 or 300 feet, and you've got a side road where there should be parking there, and unless those people happen to be having a birthday party the same event, whatever, and it's so, yeah, it's fine. Like I said, I think you know my feelings on the overall development, but I do agree that the concern of, even if this doesn't have a direct correlation with the development to the south of slowing traffic there, at least we can do this one right. That, if we can't fix that, maybe it will slow traffic where this is clearly going to be young families in large part right here, and so maybe it slows traffic a little bit, and maybe it makes it slightly less appealing to try to cut through this subdivision and get around a congested stop sign into a major state route on the margins. So, yeah, as Commissioner Grossman said, I'll tend to defer to the developer if that's your wish, and you all had looked at this before, and that was the engineer's original suggestion, is to not allow parking. I asked a question, and everyone seemed to answer it okay, so.
well, the original suggestion was not to not have parking on this north-south road. The original suggestion was to have a wider road and have parking at least on one side, I assume. Isn't that the original?
To comply with our thoroughfare plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, I tend to favor, if the developer and the owner of this property doesn't want parking on that street and they think they can sell these lots, I think it's gonna create a problem for you. I think it's gonna create an issue with regard to people violating this. I think it's gonna create perhaps it's gonna weaponize some neighbors that don't get along, who decide that they're gonna enforce this parking rule against their other neighbors who have more cars, who find it very inconvenient to have their kids or whatever parking on some side street, 3 or 4 houses down. I think it's unwise, but I'll vote for it. I mean, does the engineer have a problem with this? Is that gonna be an issue? And you're gonna load up everybody on that street. Every time they have a party, every time they have a family member or whatever, they're constantly gonna be parking on these side streets, and those other side streets. I imagine those people are not gonna like that. But, okay, that's what you want.
No, I understand, and we believe there are enough streets to offset that, there would be a large party here and there, and then that may be an issue. For the vast majority of the time, you have one person over.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with all of this if there weren't any houses on that street. But there are a bunch of houses on that street. All right.
Fine with me.
Thanks. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on this matter?
I found this on the web.
Sorry.
Your watch does.
Okay. See. So can you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. Daryl Cordray, 418 Fairview Drive, Franklin Township, or Carlisle, 45005.
Okay, and Mr. Cordray, can you affirm that you will tell the truth in this hearing today?
I do.
Thank you, go ahead.
Thank you. Just representing Franklin Township as the administrator, I do have one concern. I think Mr. Grossman, you've touched on it, and Mr. Young as well, with regards to parking. I think when we've seen with these subdivisions, especially when you're talking such a short frontage, that we're going to have a lot of cars, whether it's parties or just families in general, as they grow and have teenagers, they're going to be parking on the street. We know a lot of times people use their garages for storage, extra storage as they grow as a family. And my concern would be is just from an enforcement standpoint and from just a township standpoint, as cars park on those side streets, we're going to start to, as was mentioned, weaponizing these issues where families are going to call the sheriff's department, call the township saying, hey, we have cars that have been sitting in front of my house, blocking my mailbox, sitting here for days on end in front of my house. I want them moved. What can we do? And I am concerned that will cause an undue burden within the township and the county, having those. I think we've seen historically with neighborhoods, as they built out, most people tend to park on streets at some point just to get their cars out of their driveway or out of their garage. So that'd just be my only comment, concern to share from the township's perspective.
Yeah, I have the same concern.
Yep.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I would not be doing this.
Well, maybe we don't.
I saw another hand. Is there someone here who wishes?
My question, is it only on parking or is this just in general?
Can you come forward, please? This is on the entire hearing. Good morning. Can you please state your name for the record and your address?
Beth Hury, 4689 Dearth Road, Franklin, Ohio.
Okay, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth here today?
I do.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
So my concern, although I echo the whole parking thing, that's gonna get to be a nightmare, is on the north side. In the last review of it, when it went through as Wilson Farms, was a concern. Can you put the map back up? So, let's do this one. Up on this side, this property and this property are, plus this and two of the properties up to that direction, all drain down through this portion right here. The last time they hadn't put anything in to deal with that. In this one, it appears they do have an inlet of some form here. Don't know the size of it. Which then, by this, drains through here, all the way down here and into Lake B, which would be going the correct direction. My question is making sure that they size that appropriately, and then what they're going to do if they do any earthwork along this path to make sure that it isn't blocked at the path and not also at the houses. I have some pictures from last year of the water. I didn't take any a week ago, but it was as deep or deeper.
Thank you. Does the developer wish to respond? And can you once again state your name for the record? Yeah, sure, we'll take whatever. Thank you.
Did you mention where you lived in the proximity to this area? Did you mention where you lived in proximity to this area?
So, my property's here, my neighbors here. Are there
concerned that this is gonna back up water on your property?
I am 100% concerned they're going to turn me into a lake.
Okay, I just wanted to understand it. All right, thank you.
And possibly my neighbor over here into a
You're
lake as well.
concerned- Because they can't change if they make changes to how the water flows and things like that, that can be an issue. All right, thank you.
Correct.
All right, John Delverne with Bearbecker, 6900 Tylersville Road, Mason, Ohio, 45040. I was sworn in at the last hearing. We are aware of the drainage area. I was just checking with my colleague, Clint Oliver. There's about 42 acres of drainage tributary to that point on the map. We have a 42-inch or 3.5-foot diameter pipe under the road planned. We've submitted our drainage calculations to the Warren County Engineer's Office, and they've reviewed them. They don't have any comments on our design. So we believe we've addressed the drainage situation there adequately and are aware of it, the source.
Does the water currently flow from the north to the south?
Yes, it does. There is right now a drainage path that, this water all kind of comes into this crease here and runs this way.
Are you improving the drainage flow? Or are you changing it in any way?
Well, we're going to change it, but we are certainly meeting the requirements for the design of the storm sewer. The storm sewer, we're actually going to put this map shows it coming down here, and we have a more detailed design now that we submitted to the engineer's office. We've decided rather than conveying this all the way down this way, that we're going to put a culvert, 42-inch culvert from the back of these lots and release it back to this natural stream, and then it'll end up in our lake here.
Okay, so are you putting any mounding or any obstruction that would affect the water flow from the north to the south?
No.
Behind those homes?
No.
So
The path is going to be natural, so. It'll go down and up, yeah.
So in other words, my question to you then is, do you know whether or not the drainage from the north will be improved, stay the same? Obviously, the neighbor that's just spoken is concerned that you're going to create more of a problem for drainage, not less of a problem.
We will
Can you
not.
answer that question?
Yeah, I can answer it. Let me just get slightly technical. What we did was what I like to do is I'll go to the property line. Like, granted, our inlet's going to be down here, so almost, 150 feet, 200 feet away from the property line at the north. What, as a matter of practice, I like to come in here and analyze today's current conditions. What's the 100-year elevation in that channel today? What's that? And then size this culvert, regardless of what the county engineer's regulations require this culvert not to back water up any higher than that elevation, so that there's no impact across the property line after development. So we did run that check as part of our analysis.
And do you think it could be, what just brought up an interesting point that we see on occasion, is once people are there, this is my backyard, I want to screen something, so I start building mounds in my backyard, and all of a sudden that affects drainage sometimes severely, and then it becomes a civil issue between neighbors of you mounded, now you're having a detrimental effect on my property, and I'm going to sue you, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I understand that concern. There will be a drainage easement on the pipe itself, right? Not only a drainage easement on the pipe, but then there's an overland flow path across the roadway, and in the event that that pipe's capacity is exceeded. And then this is all open space up here that'll be controlled and owned by the homeowners association. So that's not private property where people can build mounds and do things to obstruct the flow of water.
So the storm inlet is on the common property?
Clint, did it end up on the common property, the actual inlet itself, or is it in the back of the yard?
Yeah, I believe it's, just off the property line.
Which property line?
The lot.
It's just into the green space. Plus, there will be a drainage easement on that storm pipe, so if it becomes clogged or what have you, it can be maintained.
At the HOA's expense.
Yeah, that'll be HOA. I'm pretty sure that'll end up being a private drainage easement, not a public storm sewer.
It's not gonna be the township's not responsible for that.
No, it'll be the HOA.
42 inches?
42-inch diameter, so 3.5 feet.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else here wishing to speak on this? Seeing none, then I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And yes?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Now, discussion.
Well, I think it's unwise not to put parking on that
Well,
North South Street.
I tend to agree, so I'm gonna make a motion that we do put parking on it, make it 30 feet. Sometimes we gotta tell people what to do, so that's gonna be my motion, that we approve this plan with the north-south collector road being at a width of 30 feet, with parking on the non-fire hydrant side of the road. And if that's not unanimous, I can entertain something else, but I agree, I think that's what's best. And I think that's what, in the long run, is gonna avoid a lot of problems for the township, and the township weighing in has an effect on me. So, yeah, the developer's one party, but the township also carries a lot of weight with me. And when the township is basically saying what my gut is telling me, I'm gonna defer to that, or at least that'll be my motion.
And if you would, allow me just to edit that a little, just to say that the first vote is to deviate from the thoroughfare plan, and take a vote on that. Make sure you got a unanimous vote on that before you make the ultimate motion and vote on approving the PUD Stage 2.
You couldn't just let my vagueness be vague.
So,
But I do have a point of order with regard to that. How was this originally planned? So when we're deviating, it sounds to me like maybe we're deviating from a deviation. So I want to understand what the original.
well, we're deviating from a proposal that was agreed to by parties. There
That
was.
complied.
That complied, but, well, it didn't comply with the thoroughfare plan.
I thought it did. This is the first we're being asked to deviate from the thoroughfare.
I just meant what the,
That's
come on up,
correct.
I just meant what the engineer brought forward today was a deviation from the thoroughfare plan.
Right, Bruce's point is, if we're gonna deviate from the thoroughfare plan, we have to say, let's deviate from the thoroughfare plan, I guess is his.
And Commissioner Grossman's point is, how are we deviating? And I'll let Kurt explain this if I'm wrong, but on Madison Grace, it was 36 feet of pavement, and the proposal from the engineer's office was to deviate by reducing that down to 24. What I'm hearing you say is you're inclined to deviate from 36 down to 30 and allow on-street parking.
So now, the original thing, before there was any deviation started, the thoroughfare plan had a street that was 36 feet wide, right?
Yes, sir.
And that had on-street parking.
Yes, sir.
Okay, on both sides or one side?
One side.
Both sides, okay.
One side.
One side, all right. So now the deviation ultimately being with what Dave is suggesting is that instead of going to 24 deviation with no parking, you go to 30, which is a deviation, with one side parking as it was originally planned. And I think that's what the township wants, but it's no longer what the developer wants.
But he had to have 36 inches with parking to begin with, so to do it 30 inches with parking doesn't seem to me to inconvenience the developer, but.
Well, it improves the developer's cost, because he doesn't have.
It does.
He's got 6 feet of street that he no longer has, and, which is expensive. And so I get that cost thing, but then we're looking at it as a government standpoint, and typically I defer to the developer and their interests and how they want to develop, but I also believe that this sets up the public and the township and the enforcement people with a problem. That I think that gives merit to Commissioner Young's motion.
Well, I guess, to the extent there's a unanimous agreement to deviate from the plan, then the question is, what is the deviation? There would be no deviation on the parking requirement, there would only be deviation on the width,
On that road.
on that road.
Right.
But on 2 separate roads. You also have the Green Meadows Drive, which is 36-foot pavement that would
East-west.
necessitate a unanimous deviation down to 30, which allowed parking, so parking doesn't need to be a part of it. And then same for Madison Grace. And since your testimony, Mr. Weber, was limited to north, south, east, west, just for the record, Green Meadows is the east-west,
Yes,
and Madison Grace is the north-south.
yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so the deviation has to do with the width of the road,
The
not
width
the
of the
parking.
pavement.
Yeah, pavement.
And also, as proposed by planning, there's a deviation in the amount of right-of-way. So back a curb to back a curb, so the amount of right-of-way. So on Green Meadow, the language proposed by, and in concurrence with the engineer's office, the right-of-way would be reduced from 60 feet to 56 feet.
Correct.
And then on Madison Grace, it would be reduced from 60 feet to 50 feet. Does that still work with the 30-foot?
If you go to the 30 feet, then you should also go to 56 feet on Madison Grace, the
Okay,
north-south.
so both of them 56.
Yeah, Bruce, I think from a procedural standpoint, I think if I'm making a motion to deviate, I don't want to make a vague motion, oh, we're going to deviate from the plan. No, we're going to specifically offer, this is what we're deviating from. And I think that's pretty simple, that the two roads that were just enunciated, that those will both go from 36-foot requirement with parking on one side to 30 feet with parking on one side, and concurrently to that the public easement will be reduced from 60 feet to 56 feet. So that's my motion with approval of the rest of the plan.
Is there a second to the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Great.
Now, second vote is on the stage 2, PUD stage 2. You've got to vote on that.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend the, wait a minute.
No,
The motion is to approve the amended stage 2 PUD.
This not a revise, it's, yeah, so the motion is to approve the application for the PUD stage 2 preliminary site plan, and I assume you would want to make that motion with the conditions recommended by the planning commission.
Stan? Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Good morning.
Morning. Stan, could you please state your name for the record?
Stan Williams, Warren County Regional Planning Commission. I just wanted to remind the commission that Commissioner Grossman had brought up another issue about the timing of the improvements, the parks and the trails. I'm not sure if that is something that would need to be addressed as well.
Is that not in the
Conditions?
There is a condition that Commissioner Grossman had concern in terms of its timing.
Right, and I asked the developer that question, and they said they would be developing those improvements at the time they developed the houses on that area. I think that's what they said. Maybe they can, we can close the hearing now, but.
And Stan, can we bring the condition back up? And once we do that, do you have a recommendation on how it needs to be edited to comply with Commissioner Grossman's concern?
I want to say that was a PUD stage 1 standard rather than a condition of approval at this time.
Okay.
So it should be at least in the staff report packet of the plating of those 75% when those need to be installed.
Yeah, but you see there on number 6, it says all amenities, and the amenities include these trails and paths, et cetera, have to be completed before the platting of the 166 residential lots. So this,
I think it's the 166th residential lot.
Is the 75%.
That's
so
the
that matches
75th
what-
percent
right,
threshold.
so when will the trails and paths, and I asked the question of whether this was just internal, apparently it's just internal. And then the question is, you know, is it, will the trails and paths in front of homes be completed as those homes are being completed? And I think the answer was yes.
Right, maybe the developer can speak on that.
And that was my concern, is
Right.
that there would be trails and paths that people would want to use, but they wouldn't be available to be used because they hadn't completed them yet.
Right.
And that's why I asked the question of the developers whether or not, as they develop those particular home sites, that would be done in conjunction with the trails and paths that would be useful to them, and I think the answer to that was yes. Right?
If that is, I think it was to our point that maybe you wanted, with staff conditions, maybe wanted to amend number 6 to include maybe with plating of that section would be unacceptable to our office.
Would that be, okay, that's what I'd like to do.
So what is the wording?
The wording would be that the trails and paths and amenities associated with a particular lot would be completed at the time those lots are platted. Correct? Okay, that would be
Okay,
the change.
so we need then a motion to approve the PUD Stage 2 to include the conditions provided with an amendment to Condition 6 to say that, Tom, you want
The paths and the
path-
amenities
the
would
amenity-
be, that would be completed at the time of the platting of those particular lots.
Okay. Bruce, is that motion in order?
Yes,
Okay.
and we'll tweak the resolution
Okay.
accordingly.
Is there a second then to that motion?
The motion to approve the entire PUD?
With that amended.
With the
With the
amended?
amended, yeah, my only
conditions.
final statement on this is I reluctantly vote yes on this. D.R. Horton's a good developer, I appreciate them, they've got a great engineering firm, but this is, I don't like this development, I don't like anything about this, I think the lots are too small, but this was all approved prior to our time. This was done, and the developer is complying with the rules presented before them, so with no reliance on the law, could I actually vote against this? So this is, I think we're getting the best resolution to a problem that I don't like this, but I will second that motion.
Great, roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes,
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
great. Thank you all for being here. Next, we have Suzanne Mason with the Program Manager for the Warren County Transit Service.
Thanks for coming, Daryl.
Thanks. I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks, Kurt and Neil.
Thank you, guys.
Brandon Baum from UTS is back today to discuss with you the contract that we have with UTS to operate Warren County Transit. As a refresher, he was here about a month and a half ago making a request that we amend the contract. Our current contract allows us to pay just under $33 an hour to operate the transit system. That includes dispatch, mechanics, car parts, drivers, the whole operation. He had made a request to increase the contract by $2.50 an hour so that they can fully staff the drivers. At that time, you had requested a review of the contract. Mr. McGarry did review the contract. The contract was established in 2021. It was for 1 year with 4 optional renewal years, so we're in the middle of that time span. Last week, Mr. Baum came back along with Jeff Cusio, who is the current president, or excuse me, he's the current owner of UTS. He took ownership about 6 years ago, and so they addressed the board last week. And he's back today with Michael Cronin, who is the president of UTS, to make the request to increase our hourly wage to them. Brandon and Michael?
And would you both just state your name and address for the record, please?
Brandon Baum, 9900 Princeton Glendale Road.
I'm Michael Cronin, 9900 Princeton Glendale Road.
Thank you.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys again.
Welcome back.
Becoming a regular here. Mr. Young, good to see you as well. Missed you last week, but would you like me to go through this again for Mr. Young?
Yeah,
Okay.
Dave, I think that Tom and I, given your strong reaction at the first time UTS came here, we wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to talk to them. So for the purposes of bringing us back up to speed, that's probably
I
helpful.
appreciate that so much.
You know, maybe I can help to recap this a little bit. So you want us to increase the amount we pay for your services for 2023, and every year you could end this thing and renegotiate and go out for a bidding process again. You didn't do it this year, and we have set amount that we pay this year, but you want to change that because you want to increase the hourly rate you pay your drivers from what the current rate is, about $12 an hour, to $14 an hour, and the increase that you're asking for would all be used to pay an increased rate to drivers. Am I
Yeah,
get
that's
that correct?
Full wage pass-through, yeah. So we've got about 7 to 8 drivers who have been there for over 5 years that we would like to raise by $2. Their average rate's about $12.36 per hour. And then our current hiring candidate, fresh off the street, no experience, making $12, we'd like to bring them in at 14 to increase the type of candidate that we're getting for your guys' services.
And part of the issue is we're not able to recruit drivers. The market's changed quite significantly over the past few years. So coming in at a price point, we're recruiting where people that have been here for 5 years, basically at their same rate, and we're still not able to recruit drivers. I think we have 13 drivers now.
13.
And able to run 13 routes, and working with Suzanne and her team and looking at what would be the optimum to provide the service to, to Warren County, like 17 is the number, and we've been struggling. We've been trying everything we can within those price constraints to hire drivers, and people are just not coming to the table.
But in reality, you're not doing everything you can, because you're choosing not to go into your profit
We
margin.
don't have any profit. We've lost, approximately $8,000 to $12,000 a month on this contract, so we're not digging into our profit. I'm actually writing a check from my pocket every month for anywhere between $8,000 to $12,000 to cover the losses on the contract. So, there's not profit that I can reach in my pocket and throw down to pay the driver.
So, we just negotiated this in the middle of last year? When did we enter into this?
This is the third year of the contract? Is that-
December, the renewal was December of '22.
Right, so we signed.
So that's only 4 months ago.
We signed the renewal in, when did we sign it?
Probably
October. Like, one of the big drivers, our insurance went up in December radically, which was after we signed that. We've increased our drivers from, they started here at like $10 an hour at the beginning. We've increased them to 12, and we just can't recruit people at that level. We've been trying all over the marketplace to do it, and we keep increasing the wages. If we increase the wages to $14 an hour without anything additional from the revenue side, we're gonna continue to lose additional money, and it's extremely hard to do that where I'm already losing $8,000 to $12,000 a month just to keep writing checks to do that.
Why did you, and again, I've entered into bad contracts myself before, is the only reason, and again, the background on this, and the only reason I'm entertaining this at all is you are not the same ownership group that sued me but 10 years ago or whatever it was over.
In
the
your
most ridiculous-
capacity as a county
yeah,
commissioner.
Whatever. I mean, but I took offense to it simply because it was the most ridiculous justification for suing us over a contract award that I've ever seen. And so I didn't like what was going on, and I thought they took advantage of it through the legal system. So when I hear a private entity coming in and saying, you know, we entered into a contract, we said we were gonna, not just said, we represented to the counterparty of this contract that we're gonna do certain things. We're gonna run this system, we're gonna provide these services to your residents, we're gonna do blank, 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 and blank. And you made a free market choice, literally less than 6 months ago, to enter into this contract at these rates, and now you're coming in and saying, you know, I can't do this anymore.
I can continue doing it through the end of the contract term. You know, the problem is we're not gonna be able to provide the best service to the county, the Warren County.
What if we
residents.
could you do, I don't like short-term things, what if we gave you an increase but then locked it in for an 18-month period? That we would give you, you tell us what that needs to be, because obviously inflation for the most part, hopefully, is rolled over. You're seeing some declines in the job market. Wage inflation is not what it once was 6, 8, 12 months ago. What if we said, okay, we'll give you an increase, but you need to tell us where that increase is for not just 23, but also 24, to where then we have some upside of weight. Yeah, we went ahead and gave them something here, and maybe that's a little more than even $2 an hour, but we're locking you in to where I don't want to have this conversation again during 24. You know, a year and a half contract is not all that much.
Sure, and we're in the middle of 3, so there's 2 additional options.
We're a 5-year, it's a
That's correct.
5-year
So this is
contract.
We're 3 months into, or I guess it's April already.
Well, I'm just saying, we're already going to deviate from the contract
Sure.
by entertaining this.
We would be willing to look at an extended contract term. The problem is, right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to pass this on to our drivers. We're trying to solve the simple problem of hiring drivers so we can be able to get, it's not if we can hire more drivers and get up to that 17 count, you know, you have incremental revenue, so it's the volume of the business that helps stabilize the business and also provide the services that we need in the community. If I can only hire 13 drivers, it's one of these things that just, it multiplies on itself, right? So if you have 13 drivers, I can only run 13 routes, the overall revenue goes down. It's a whole mix. So the theory behind this is if we can increase our driver count, you know, we're passing that money straight on to the drivers. $2.50 is basically, you know, it's our cost of giving $2 to the driver, plus all the employee costs, the health care, the payroll taxes, et cetera. That's basically what that other 50 cents does. So we can hire drivers and bring the overall revenue to the program up. Because I think we're spending well below what we're supposed to be, what's been allocated from a budget perspective. So we'll still be within our budget. There's no additional money that hasn't been allocated already that's going to this. It's to basically put money to the driver so we can increase the volume. And that helps fix the overall picture, not just the driver picture.
In our contract, it's cannot exceed $930,000 annually, and I think for the past 3 years, we've been in $700,000 range, give or take. So
And it's not about making more money. You know, we've been a long-term partner with Warren County. You know, when the current ownership came in, that was in 2017, and I understand some things happened with the old owners, and I apologize for that. There's nothing we can do to change what's happened in the past. That's not how we generally do business, and I can't really say to what they've done, you know, but we've been a partner with Suzanne and her team for a long time, and all of you to provide the services here. We just want to continue to do that and not continue to lose money on the contract.
So-
Because we just can't do that operationally. Our de facto choice will be to terminate the contract at the end of this term and go out for bid, which we can do. You know, I think we were the only bidder last time. You know, and we try to go into these things and look at them and say, how can we perform these contracts? You know, this is more of a public service than anything else. So we don't, you know, when we came in and bid this, I think we had a profit margin of 5% built in there. So we have a very low profit margin to begin with. And the idea is this is a service that the community needs. That's why we bid it out that way. But when these things happen, you know, things change. You know, the market's changed, our insurance has radically changed. We're eating a lot of that. The big thing is the labor market. I can't hire people, and I can't continue to lose money. And that's why we're at the predicament, bringing it to you and saying, hey, you know, if I want to cover my costs and my loss, my number's higher than $2.50 an hour. I'm just trying to.
But you're saying you'll make that up on volume in a lot of ways, because a lot of your fixed costs are already involved.
Exactly.
And if you go from 13 drivers to 17, you're gonna incrementally increase revenue over here, and your fixed are gonna stay about the same, and then all of a sudden you go from losing 10 grand to maybe making a little.
I'm probably not gonna make a little. I mean, I may make a very little, but my idea, I just wanna get this, so I'm not losing money on this deal. That's effectively what I'm trying to do, and continue to provide the service. You know, we use those mechanics to do some other things. We don't even allocate any of the cost of the mechanics anymore to Warren County. So I'm using that garage to help take care of some of my other vehicles. So I've got another garage in Cincinnati I can move all that stuff to. But I'm trying to take as much cost out of Warren County as possible and allocate it, so I'm not using it on this contract, so I can at least break even on it. And that's my ultimate.
How does your income, how do you get income on this contract? Who pays you for your service under this contract? Are we paying them?
Per revenue hour, per hour that our drivers on the road taking clients.
Right, so under our contract, the way in which you make, because the people that use your service, they're not paying you.
No, you guys get
We're
their-
the ones that are paying you under this contract. So here's so to understand why this is advantageous to you, because I didn't understand that, maybe before David just asked his question. And the last time you guys were up, I was going in on this question. Because if this is just a straight pass-through, that, you know, you're not making any money on our changing that cost or that amount being paid to you. The way in which this improves your bottom line is that we're going to, under our contract, be paying you more because you have more drivers out there. Is that right?
Correct. To Mr. Young's point, what happens here is with the volume increases, if I've got 13 drivers now, I've got X revenue hours, right? If I have 17 drivers and I can push this $2 cost onto them and straight pass through to them, then we have more revenue hours. And to your point, you have a variable component and a fixed component of your cost. You know, the variable component are things like, you know, your driver's wages, maintenance, things like that. The fixed component is your overhead, insurance, you know, the staff members, et cetera. So those don't change. So as we increase the volume and go from 13 to 17, we actually end up having more incremental revenue to cover our variable costs, and our fixed are fixed. So effectively, you know, we're trying to get to that point of break even, or if we get a little profit, that would be fabulous. I'm not seeing that happening necessarily, but if we can just get to the point where we're breaking even on this, and I'm not writing a check every month, I would be happy getting through the contract with that.
But the point is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Tom.
So the point is that if we give you more money so you can hire more drivers, you'll be paid more by us.
Right.
That helps you with your bottom line. That's the point you're making. And in fact, you could do this without us giving you more money and improve your bottom line too, under that theory, but not enough, I take it.
Well, that's what we've been trying to do. I think that's why we had hope, because we had hope that we could hire 3 additional drivers at $12.50, let's say, because the math does work out at some point, whether it's 16, 17 drivers where it would cover it. But we went from LinkedIn to Indeed to ZipRecruiter to find people. Nobody's biting at $12.50. So we want to bring that up to 14, 15, and then that's where this comes into play.
All right, and then this came back to the question I asked y'all last week, and maybe before that too, that under our contract, you always have the option to give us notice, and then we go out for new bids every year. And you didn't choose to do that this past year. And then I think the point you made now, which may be a new point, is that, well, there was this increase in insurance or some other cost to you that you didn't know about until December, which was after the time you could give notice to renegotiate and to go out for another bid process. How much was that increase to you?
I mean, I think the insurance increase ended up being, I think it was 30-some%. I don't know the breakdown.
I can get that number for you if you'd like. I don't have an exact number.
Well, the percentage doesn't help me any.
Yeah.
If you go on like rent, for example, right, I mean, it's, what, 800 over 3,000, so.
Because you see, my problem with this whole thing is that I think contracts are sacrosanct. You enter a contract, we got a contract which basically is sacrosanct for a year, and now we're being asked to change it. And you had the ability every year to renegotiate, go out for new bids, but you chose not to do it. Now, you're coming into us and asking us basically to change the terms of the contract as you've requested, and I never like doing that. But at the same time, on the other hand, Shannon made the point last week, which is this is a service for the people of our county. And right now, I think what you're telling us is that there's a segment of our county that's not being properly served. And that they would be served if we did this. So.
Which is part of my problem. If you were the same ownership group, we wouldn't have this conversation. Honestly, I'd be suing you right now because you're breaching the contract with us. I really don't care about your margins. I care about the service to the residents. You represented to us that you were going to do all these things at this price point. You're saying, you know, we can't do all these things to all these residents. There's so many people we can't get to that we'd like to get to because we're not even covering our costs. And again, that's a contract that we entered into. So again, I've got heartburn with UTS from the past, but not with your group. Obviously, you've made that clear, and you don't have to apologize for what they did. It wasn't you. So I don't hold that against you, but if it was the same group, I would be playing hardball and saying, you're publicly admitting you're not performing under what you agreed to in your contract.
I think we are performing, and I don't think we're in breach of contract.
Because there's no minimum number of buses.
There's no minimum service level that we're required to perform under the contract. I think we've had our council look at it, and I'm assuming your council's looked at it as well, that we're not under breach of contract. What we're trying to do is we're significantly underutilizing the dollars that are being allocated to be able to do this, and we're not providing the best service to the residents of the county.
So, which is an interesting point. So from a service standpoint, really what we're talking about is, yeah, let's increase, it's only a few bucks, $2 or $3 here or there on, now we can go from 13 or 14 drivers to 17, look at how many more people we can do, and we go from spending $700,000 to $900,000.
That's what we budgeted based on what the historic ridership has been. And so the problem we are facing here is that we aren't able to serve what we've historically served because of the shortage of drivers. There's not as many routes being covered as previously done. And, hold on, please. So, you know, the way I look at this is we can't get blood from a turnip. And the question I think we have to consider, along with the terms of the contract and how we feel about perhaps the time to have this conversation was Q4 and not Q1 of the following year, is, you know, if we had one bidder the last time we signed this contract and we are serving fewer residents in the county as a result of this contract, I fear that we may, you know, when this issue gets brought forward in Q4 of this year, we're going to be looking at an entirely different set of terms to consider. And when we rebid, if we rebid, there will be nobody who's going to bid on this contract. So, like, I think this is, I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation, and for me, I want the service in the county, to serve the people in the county, and there aren't a lot of other providers out there saying, we think we can do it better, faster, cheaper. In fact, the market is telling us, based on our last bid, before double-digit inflation, that there weren't many willing providers at that time. So I don't know who you hire at $12. You can't hire anybody for $12, and it doesn't surprise me you can't hire anybody for $12. So from my standpoint, it's like we either have to decide, do we want to increase the wages of the drivers, notwithstanding our frustration that this wasn't brought earlier? And for that, my answer is, provided it is a pass-through directly to the providers for this period of time between now and the end of the year, I would agree to that. But because it's not, we budgeted for a lot more money, and we're just not serving residents.
Which was my question to you, Suzanne. Are we not serving residents, or what is the shortfall of services that we're seeing? When I see free medical rides, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I thought those were consistent. Increase in customers post-COVID, what are we?
I can't speak to the slide. However, yes, they have stopped. We had a Lebanon loop, which went around the city of Lebanon, and that almost never runs now, I believe.
We have one guy who works 2 days a week who runs it for us.
Right, and there were a lot of residents in Lebanon who relied on that loop to get to Kroger, to get to, their groceries and various locations. And so it has decreased service. People are trying to find other ways to get to their jobs. They have prioritized dialysis and cancer chemo patients. They've prioritized those and people going to work. But other people wanting to get their groceries, those types of errands have been affected.
Do we still have any school kids using this for
No.
bus transportation? Because we did at one point.
Okay, that might have been a while. Well, I take that back. We do have a small contract with Springboro for their DD students, and there's about, maybe 5 students that they run to their job location.
That's our school bus. We have 2 school buses also on the property, tip, and they do, there's a
Yeah,
Springboro
that's not a
school.
part of Warren County,
Oh,
just
okay.
the Spring, yeah, there is one contract with the city of Springboro for a few of their developmentally delayed students.
All right, so do you all intend to continue with this contract next year?
I mean, right, we have to see what the finances look like, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not gonna say that, hey, if we do this, we're locked in and loaded. I wouldn't be truthful. We've gotta see how this changes, what the financial outlook looks like. If it changes, if we can get to that volume where we can get to the point where we're break even or slightly positive, then we will continue with it. If we're at a point that we continue to lose money and aren't able to do that, we wouldn't be able to continue with the next option year of the contract. I mean, that's the reality behind the situation.
Exactly, and I understand that, and that the contract is created so that you could do that. But then the question that I'm really asking is whether this is just a stopgap measure for you to try to improve the best you can your results this year, when your real intent is that this is just for the end of this year and then you're gonna get out of this thing.
We've been a long-term partner, with Warren County operating this, and we intend to continue to do that. We just need to do so in a position where we're not losing money on it. That's the bottom line on it.
Yeah, well, that's understandable, bottom line. But I would have thought that were that a big concern, you would have put us into ending the contract and going after competitive bids for this year. But you didn't do that, which has been always the thing that has made me hesitate over this, because you were deviating from a contract that you had every right to renegotiate and enter into competitive bids last year, but you didn't do it. So, and that's, I just don't do contracts like that.
Which is why I ask about, if you did this, would you be willing to basically have a renewal period now, and this runs through 2024, 12/31 at that?
We can look at what the financial ramifications of that are and sit down to say, how do we make it advantageous for the 2024 period? So I don't know what I think we have 2.5% between this year and the next year, is that correct?
Yeah, all 5 years were 2.5% increases.
So we've had a 4.7%, an 8.6%, and a 6% increase to the CPI over that period. And we've only had a 2.5% increase in the contract for each year. So, our costs are like this and our revenue's like this. So we're in a position where, the cost has been increasing significantly more than the revenue. So if we could get to a point where we could get through 2024 and we would be at a small margin or break-even position, of course, I want to provide the service to the county, and that's part of our mission, right? I mean, this is honestly a very small contract, but we continue to do it because it provides a community service. Most all the drivers that work on these routes are residents of the community. My mechanics are residents of the community here. We have operations here. So everything's not about just dollars and cents. It's not how much money can I make off this guy or how much money can I make off this guy. This is a particular service that is a small contract, but we continue to consistently lose money on it. So I'm trying to get that stabilized to say, yeah, we have a 5-year deal. I want to continue working out that 5-year deal, but I can't continue to do it when I'm writing a check every month.
Sure you can, and I understand that entirely. I get that. But, I never bought the Buddy's Carpet Barn commercial about how he doesn't care about making money, he just loves to sell carpet, okay? Because everybody that's in business is only gonna stay in business and be able to do their business if they make money. All right? So the quandary I see you in is that you're not making money. And this maybe has a vehicle for doing that, but if we were to say, all right, let's terminate this contract and let's go out for bid. Let's keep you in the contract now, but let's go out and allow you to bid on this contract and renegotiate it right now and go out to competitive bidding. Would you bid on this again right now?
Would I, if you were willing to put it out for bid right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be significantly higher than this when we come back.
All right, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, but again, it's not, and I appreciate that that's what the free market is bearing, but also, we're government. We can go hire drivers. We don't, who owns the vans? Don't we own the vans?
You own the vans.
Yeah, we own the vans. We can hire people. Theoretically, it's cheaper to do it this way, but we can operate our own system if we so choose. So it's not, oh, no one's gonna be taken to the doctor. No, we can do that, but we just chose to outsource this to a private entity right now. That's where and again, I don't disagree with the business model you're in. My biggest hesitation is, you knew these factors 4 or 5 months ago and you renewed the contract. Why wasn't it a fire drill then? But it is what it is. So now, if we actually play ball with you and say, okay, we're gonna increase this pass-through directly to be allocated to driver salaries, then I'd rather just go ahead and sign a new contract that goes through 12/31 of '24. And that way it gives us some stability of, oh, they're not just kind of gonna go in December, October, November, December of this year and say, hey, we're done with you guys, we're not gonna renew, let's go to a new bidding cycle and we're gonna jack you up 12%. And then all of a sudden, we're scrambling to try to do this ourselves. At least it gives us a little bit of, 19 months or something of stability.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I need to look at the numbers. I can't.
Why don't you take a look at it? Again, I don't want to put you on the spot right now. Why don't you go back and do more of a macro analysis of, we're locking this in for the next 19 months? And what would that look like?
Yeah, and we can definitely do that and come back to you all with some other numbers, because I know we have a planned increase. We just have to look at what the run rate is on the cost. My fear is the costs continue to escalate, and I do understand, stability. You're saying, hey, we're willing to talk to you guys and figure this out. I don't want a Band-Aid. I want a little bit bigger patch to fix it so we have some more certainty over a longer period. So I think that's reasonable. We just need to look at, I can't stand in front of you and say yes or no without
Fair enough.
looking at the numbers behind it.
Well, and I don't think there's anything magical about 19 months either. If we're willing to go beyond a 12-month renewal you know, if there's something that's more than 19 months that you want to proffer up, I think that that's legitimate too. I mean, I find a 5-year, 1-year renewable contract to be very strange, but I think the point is well taken that Commissioner Young raises around, you know, how do we protect ourselves in this now truncated period of time?
And historically, it's been a scenario where we've been really, when we've been looking at what the CPI is doing and looking what inflation's been doing, you know, when we look at these, when this contract was originally entered into, you know, prior to that, we had a whole different lens on what inflation had been done historically. You know, we've had super low, you know, inflation since, you know, basically, you know, the early 80s. You know, we've had a very low inflation rate going on. So we've been looking at, you know, we said 2.5% is kind of what we built into our contracts, and that historically has always been working. Now, all of our contracts with everybody that we have under the sun basically peg whatever the annual increases are to what the change in CPI is. And if they go for a fixed rate, we have to look at our historical CPI, where we say, you know, we can say, okay, if the CPI-U is what we use, which is basically the CPI for like an entire market basket for the urban consumers. And we say, you know, generally we peg the contracts to that. And if, like we had up in Columbus, we had some contracts where like, well, we need a specific percent. And I said, well, the percent of that historically right now on an 18-month trend is 8.9%. So I can put it in at 8.9%, you know, but it's probably going to be lower on the actual. So, you know, which do you want? And they locked it in at 8.9%. So it's one of those things. Those are the type of increases that we're seeing now because it's related to the cost. And really where a lot of this inflation has come in is right in the cost of wages for these people.
It's amazing how when you pay people not to work, then your pool gets smaller, and you have $31 trillion in debt, and you spend an extra $6 trillion in a 3-year period. Imagine that, inflation happens.
And our base driver weight, like even in our other markets, when we look at different types of drivers that are driving vans and things, we've seen those things go through the roof. You know, we've almost increased, you know, probably I think close to 50% what we're paying on wages and drivers, but a lot of those contracts are single-year contracts, so they reset a lot faster. So we're just trying to make a solution that works for both the county, that works for the residents, and works for Suzanne and her team, and then that works for us. So we all, you know, when you have a contract and everybody wins when you walk away from the table, and everybody thinks that, yeah, we have a good solution to this, that's the type of deal that makes everybody happy, and that's what we're going for here. So what we'll look at is we'll look at two things. We'll look at what do we do if we do this over the next, you know, 18 months through 2024, and, you know, for Ms. Jones, you know, we'll look at it if we go through 2025 also, and kind of look at that and say, hey, this is a solution that we want to present to you, that we think we can continue to get these incremental drivers. You know, like say if I get the incremental drivers, the overall revenue goes up. It's one of these things where you've got a lot of dials that you turn to try to get to the solution, but we've got to go through and crunch the data and kind of see what it looks like to come back with you with the solution to say, how can we get a longer term solution? Because if this goes out for rebid, you know, it will be significantly higher than this. And not just from me, but if anybody bids, and even if you guys try to operate it yourself, it'll be in a situation where, you know, just the cost of doing that, the maintenance, the drivers, all those things, once you get into that operation side, you know, there's a lot more to it than just hiring a few drivers to come do it, but I understand your point. This is something you can do yourselves, and you've elected to have somebody outside do it, just from a cost efficiency, you know, a whole slew of different perspectives. So we'll come back with the proposal through the end of 2024 and through the end of 2025, and hopefully can come with a good solution that works for everybody here.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Suzanne, anything else?
May I have just 20 seconds to tell you a good story? last year, the board allowed us to accept a grant from Ohio Department of Transportation to provide free medical rides. Rather than just throw money at medical rides, Mrs. Zindel and the board recommended that we have emphasis months. So 1 month emphasis was dental and eye appointments, 1 month was dialysis, et cetera. And we went back to ODOT to tell them how it was going, and it was a successful event. And they liked your idea so much that they used it as a model and recommended to other communities to base their programs on what Warren County did. So I wanted to let you know that your recommendation was successful and modeled after.
Thank you, Suzanne. We really appreciate your leadership. Okay, is there anything else? State of the state, or state of the county today? Tina, you have anything else?
I have a resolution for consideration. You're scheduled to have a meeting this Thursday.
So a resolution to cancel
consider
Thursdays?
canceling, or whether you would like to hold.
So
it.
moved.
Second.
And yes? Nothing else for the good of the order. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
And yes. Thank you.